Welcome to Storycomic Presents, where we interview amazing storytellers and artists. This is episode 172. I'm your host, Barney Smith of Storycomic.com, and we're excited to have back with us the acclaimed and talented creative team of Bound, Matt and Therese.
Hello.
Thank you.
Therese, welcome back. How's it going?
It's good.
It's good. We've had it's been a couple of years.
Yeah.
It's we're kind of bookending our conversation through. When we first talked, it was kind of in the beginning of a pandemic, and now we're kind of near the end of it. So it's interesting to see that we're back together on the other side of it.
Yeah.
Through that mists and forest and darkness, and here we are again. So congratulations! I know when we first talked a couple years ago, you were promoting issue 4 of Bound, and now you are well on the way of working on issue 7. Is that what you said?
Yeah, we're going to be starting issue 7. We've got issue 6 is a double issue.
It's a big one.
Yeah. We didn't want to stop it. At the point we could have stopped it, we've done that a few times, so we didn't want to do that like for a sixth time.
So talk for those that are that will be a little unfamiliar of Bound. Do you want to, and also anybody that hasn't seen the classic episode 13 of where Matt and Therese, we talked a couple of years ago. Do you want to kind of give people a little bit of a background on what Bound is and why they should be reading it?
Bound is a science fiction horror post-apocalyptic story about Natalia Kane. She gets fed on by a demon, Seth, and they become bound together. And she has to spend all 12 issues trying to get rid of him and figure out this whole mystery. And she's seeing monsters. She's takes place in the future after the final war, where she's like in the last vestige of human civilization, and she kind of starts to see the world unravel around her, and she's trying to figure out what's going on.
It is, as you say, there is a bit of what did you call it? It's kind of a post-apocalyptic science fiction supernatural horror.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that captures that.
It's a lot of things we put into it that are take a little bit of this, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, mix it all together.
Right. And from the world building perspective, and we know as we talked in your previous interview, that this was kind of created by you and a friend, and after that kind of faded off, and Therese helped write it, you got his blessing to say, yeah, go ahead and keep the story going. And I know earlier, Therese, you were really working on the established storyline that was already written up by Matt, and now you're working on episodes. You're working on issue 7. How much, for percentile wise, how does it go with the meta plot that Matt came up with? How much of now are we working with of more of your storytelling expertise putting into it right now?
Yeah, it's definitely shifted. The broader story, the whole main arc is still in his brain, so must wait for pictures. But we do the storyboarding together. We do an outline together where he'll jot things down, I'll go put things in. I do a lot of free writes in the world of Bound that aren't actually in the story. And then when we do the storyboarding and we need to get from point A to point C, a lot of the time something I've worked up works in as point B. So like issue 6 is an issue that has a lot more elements that were things that just were from my brain, which was really kind of interesting to write things out and then see him draw them and see what they look like on the page. And you know, when you write your favorite parts, but he's the lead on the project. So I know sometimes my favorite parts might not go in the story. So when you see him draw something in specifically for a favorite part, it feels pretty good. It's definitely shifted, but it's, I don't know. I think it's, I can't really put a percentage because it varies depending on what we're doing.
Yeah, there'll be points where we have, yeah, like she said, point A, and I might have point A and point C, but we need to bridge them together. Like, how do we get to this other part of the story? And Therese is really good with coming up with solutions and how she sees it from a completely different angle. And yeah, it becomes very collaborative in that way, because I don't think I would see those things without her input, because I think all visually. So I'm imagining all this stuff in my head through images, and she can come in and say, well, we need, we can do this or that. And
because you stated that you wanted to have it 12 issues, and you just said that you had your issue 6 was kind of double side. What was the purpose to making that a bigger issue? Was it because it's kind of a halfway between when you hit issue 6 as your 12 issue arc, or is it because you wanted to tell more story and it was just purely story reasoning?
Yeah, it was just it didn't seem natural to stop it halfway through. I mean, we could have stopped on page 23 instead of page 54, but we had left on kind of cliffhangers like that in previous issues, and I didn't feel like it was a good time to repeat that. I wanted to keep it going so that we did answer some questions, but leave more questions, leave some of the mystery in there without answering everything. And we want people to have somewhat of an idea of where it's going, but we want to keep them guessing too. So I felt like it just had it. We built so much up the previous 5 issues that I think we needed to like pay some of it off in the story. And unfortunately fortunately, it's not really a bad thing, but it became a double issue because of that, which was a challenge for me, especially drawing it.
What I love about your storyline is it's so character driven, and there's, as you mentioned before as well, is that what the whole world is, what's happening, and what point do you feed as writers? Might be go to both of you as writers, how important it is to kind of drop feed some world building aspects to the issues as compared to character development?
I'm thoughtful. That's a good question. I think sometimes it comes very natural to the story while Matt's drawing it, that it just evolves on the pages. I think sometimes there's a little bit of logistics of, we don't have quite enough to fit on a whole page, so let's do a little world building and pan out, or I'm kind of assuming because he draws all of it. For the story itself, we definitely try to keep pacing between action, world building, character arc, so it's weaving in between, so you don't get so stuck in action that you're exhausted, so you don't get so stuck in character arc you forgot there were things going on around you. So with the world building and the character, I think we try to definitely just find that balance, and sometimes, use them to reinforce each other too. If a character is going through something dark, let's put them in a dark space. If they're coming to something and they're realizing something, let's bring them into a light space. So I think there's a little bit of that too, where you can do both at the same time, which is a space saver, but also good storytelling.
Yeah, I've definitely dropped things like there's a lot of elements of like more science fiction-y type stuff and like tech and things I would like to explore after we finish book one. But there's a lot of things like within the city that I kind of had to sacrifice as far as like showing the different different districts and different like neighborhoods and like the different technology that's used. There's a lot of things that are like in my head, and I'm sure Therese has in her head that just don't fit, unfortunately, into Natalia. Natalia's story is very much about her and facing these creatures, you know. So, and what she's going to experience for the next 6 issues. So there's not a whole lot of room for her to you know, just to bring in like the scenery, unfortunately. So in my mind, that stuff's okay to just cut, even though I do want it, you know, it's like I find that stuff cool, like atmospheric stuff and technology and just like the world itself I would like to show more of, but unfortunately, like you have to pick your battles and you can't. I think the story would suffer if we tried to pack everything in.
Yeah, definitely would.
And is that something that would that be something too? Is like as you work on it, is this the world itself that you created? Is this something that you would be, you know, also kind of willing to share as like giving people like a wiki of this is what's available, this is what the world is, and creating some story seeds, or even looking at creating some sort of like some source book material to let people tell side stories?
That's a good idea, actually. Never really thought about that too much, but I think in book 2 that we're like kind of slowly planning around as we work on book 1. Therese is more involved. She has a better idea of what things are going to happen there. It's going to be a different story, but it's going to overlap with the current story. And if we can pull it off, we think it's going to be really great because it's kind of unique. But it's going to take place slightly before the current story, and then overlap with the current story,
and then go beyond
and then
it.
just go a little bit beyond it too. So
right.
We're hoping to expand on a lot of that stuff, and yeah, I mean, it's kind of like it just keeps expanding. The tree just keeps growing, you know, from these early like very simple seeds. It just keeps getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah,
great. Because absolutely, like, what's stopping you all from kind of writing scripts out and then like reaching out to other artists to keep the story going?
Yeah. There's some I think there's some wiggle room, especially in books 2 and 3. 3 is just like a basic idea at this point, but I think 2 is shaping up to be something where some other people could get involved.
That's right now. I think there's still that parental desire to not let our baby out into the world, and we don't trust other people with it yet.
Right.
Once book 1 is established, though, and we get book 2 started, it would be because it is going to explore more of the world in and around the city. So it's going to be there's potential where someone's art style that was similar, but it's not quite the same because we've grown to love Matt's art style.
Right.
But it would work without feeling awkward or like we like did a bait and switch. Like I think we could layer in other art if we wanted.
I'd love to get it.
That would be really.
I'd love to
really
focus
great.
on pencils.
Yeah.
I haven't, and now Bound is just 100% digital, and I go from rough blue sketch to ink, just for time's sake. But I really love graphite, and I love the way that penciled comic book pages look. So I'd love to just focus on that. So that's something that we've long thought about, just getting someone else to do the inks, and we'd love to get a letterer too, and get some other team members on if that's an option.
Right. And you do have lots of, I'm fortunate enough to, talking about your Patreon, you got a great Patreon as well. I've been
Thank you.
really fortunate to kind of follow it along as well. And so talk to us a bit about, as you kind of mentioned earlier, that the process of drawing it. How do you all work on writing the entire script first and then start doing page by page? Talk to us a bit about, again, like your process of how you would create an issue.
Well, I'll write a very rough, just like almost like bullet points of what needs to happen per issue or per chapter. And Therese and I will sit down and kind of flesh it out a little bit. For the last couple of issues, I've written more detailed outlines of like what I want on each page. And then I'll do really rough thumbnails of the whole thing. Like in 1 or 2 sittings, I'll just do the whole. I'll do every little page will be a little tiny, like 2x2 thumbnail, and then from that, I will start working on more detailed rough pages, and now with technology, I would just start inking them right over the roughs instead of where I used to actually physically draw it on Bristol board with 2H graphite and then ink over that with real ink. It just seemed to take way too long because I was really like fussy with the pencils, and I wanted them to look a certain way, even though they're going to be inked over. Like, I would get too fixated on them. So now I really don't have much of a choice but to try and go straight to the inks and make it look hopefully the way I want it to.
Right.
It's a little messy. Things are not quite where I want them to be in terms of like consistency and kind of there's that fine line. I was looking at some of Will Eisner's inks, who made the Spirit. He's like, legend. But he towards the end of his career, when he was just doing his own things, it seemed like he was fine with some messier pages. And I'd love to get to the point where I feel the same way, because I look at other people's stuff and they definitely, there's a lot of like energy there, and it's not like this really clean, like rigid lines. And I'm completely fine with someone else doing that. But when I look at my own, I'm like, ugh, I need to hone my skills more. It's like, I don't know. I don't know if I'll ever get to that point where I'm like, oh yeah, this is exactly what I had in mind. But
it reminded us also, like you talked in our last interview about the words itself, the scripting on there, and that was you can discuss a bit about the language that you've been putting into it as well.
Yeah, we wanted to use I like katakana in manga. I like the sound effects. I think they just aesthetically look better. So I wanted to like bridge those two worlds, because I have Western influences from Western comics, comics from the United States, and I have a lot of influences from Japan too. So I wanted to kind of bridge those two worlds, and I don't know. I love the way that katakana looks, and I feel like you can get a little more creative with it. I'm not a letterer, so just like doing my own block letters of sound effects would not. I don't think it would work as well. And I kind of wanted to look a little bit more international too, so where you didn't quite know where it was, or where it was taking place or what the future might hold.
Right. And so you've been doing this now, as you said, you're working on issue 7 now. Issues 1 through 6 are available. What are some of the things, I'm just curious to both of you, is looking at the first issue, is there anything that you would say, man, we could have done that? I learned now that, when we work on issue 7,
Mm-hmm.
not, is there anything that when you look at it, because as you both are you both are, basically perfectionists when it comes to your work. Is there anything that you were like, I really want to, I wish I know now not to do this or that? What are some of those things that you see in your first few issues?
Yeah, visually there's no end to what I feel like. If especially early on, because I think you probably have that first version of Bound, where it was very like dark. I used a lot of tone. I used like way too much gray tone, or CG Zipatone.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of that stuff over time, and I did like end up redrawing a bunch of pages from the first issue. But there's a lot of stuff that I've learned, especially over the last few years, about typography and getting word balloons to look more, legible. They're not too close to the edge of the balloon. They're not, too far away. Trying to get all the spacing between letters,
Right.
and I think that's where in the future, if we could get a real letter, would really I think improve the experience overall, because some of it's not very consistent. We're relying on the computer to try and tweak everything, which has its advantages also. But I feel like there's something about when someone can do the real lettering, that there's like a consistency throughout.
So like on your first issue here, was this real, that the lettering here, is that
was I believe Adobe InDesign. I think I did all the lettering in that. Now I use Affinity, just because it's cheaper, but Affinity Publisher.
Right. Yeah. So talk to us a bit about that. How what's that final you get from, Therese, you, at that point where you say, here's the manuscript, like here's what I read out. Do you actually have like your comic script? Does it say panel 1 word? How does that?
He usually, when he scripts them, sometimes he'll include page numbers. I will go through, and in my version of it, the versions that we send back and forth to each other are very inconsistent. I will a lot of times put in a lot of notes of page 1, panel 2, panel 3, or sometimes if there's a lot of panels, I'll be like second to last panel on the page. But we also sometimes might not specify panels if we don't quite know where it's going to land. And so sometimes it's broken down very tiny little detail. And sometimes it's like pages 18 through 20. And then here's the script, and we'll figure out what goes, because I don't think it will ever stop being a thing. We'll script it. We do, he does his really brief outline. It goes back and forth, but I play with it a lot while he's drawing, and we go back and forth a few times. But every single time there are things he draws that no longer need to be said. So there is sometimes dialogue that needs to be cut. Sometimes because he drew that, the other dialogue needs to be changed. And so the script really is kind of, I try to make it look nice and organized. There's always at least one version that looks organized, and it's usually the version that's least like what ends up on the page. Because I do all the fussy, formatting and stuff while he's drawing, because I'm the writer, and that just doesn't take as long. And then once we actually get down to like putting stuff on the page, the script just gets rougher and rougher looking, and numbers drop off, and it'll be page 18 and all of a sudden it's page 24 and you're like just trying to figure out. And sometimes I can't even tell, like I'll know that like certain dialogue we wrote together and that he knows exactly which panel, but there's so much expression. I'm like, ooh, does it go in this one? or this one, which facial expression is going to capture it? And I have a feeling he knew that when he drew it. So sometimes it's a little tricky that way too. There are things that I like don't quite know where to put them because I can tell there's something very specific that he was thinking when he drew it. So it's definitely.
Yeah, I have to kind of recite the lines in my head as I'm drawing them. So like it's weird. It's like a movie in my head kind of. So I see them, reciting the lines, and I try to capture that on the page. And I try to follow a little bit of like a formula of where the eye is going to go. So it doesn't always fit with what Therese had in mind. Mm-hmm. But I think somehow things just work out sometimes.
Yeah, it like definitely.
On paper, you'd think, oh, this is never going to fit on this. Like, it's not going to.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the things we have improved on since the first issue, is because I feel like the first issue or two, sometimes we flip the page and this has to be set on this page, and there's like nowhere to put a balloon without blocking something we really liked. So I do feel like that is one of the improvements. There's more space to fit stuff in. Right. It is amazing to me sometimes though that we'll have 2 pages fully typed, maybe like single spaced, and how do we get it all on one page drawn, and then it all fits in and flows and it looks great. And
there's that kind of like happy accidents kind of
sometimes. Right.
But that's one of the things I think over time I got to be more conscious of, like, there's got to be word balloons on this page. I can't just draw and not think about the background. Sometimes it doesn't.
I definitely remember it was one of the first 3 issues too, where you drew a box for words to go in. Mm-hmm. And I don't think we even had words yet. We were like, we have to put something there.
So that's a good point. So I'm really curious also about from what type of advice would you give for someone like someone who wants to make a comic, says, hey, my partner wants to go in on me on making this comic book. What would be your advice or boundaries, or what would you be if someone came to you and says, my partner wants to work with me on a comic book? What would be your advice to them, I guess?
I would, one of the most important things is to be like open-minded and accepting of criticism and other people's ideas. I mean, if I feel very strongly about something, I basically have to like sell it to Therese. If she wants to change the line or something, then I have to be like, well, this is why I thought this worked. Because I think it's something that you build over time, that you really, you don't take it personally. You don't get defensive. You don't get into arguments about the creative process, because it is both like personal, but it's also like a team effort between the two of us. So having that like trust to where you can both tell each other or multiple people everything that's on your mind and how you feel about everything. It might not always go that way, it might not change, but you at least have to have that like safe environment to where you can have creative freedom and not worry about someone always like shooting down your ideas, or someone always appeasing your ideas because they're afraid to hurt your feelings or something. I think for the sake of whatever you're working on, everyone has to be like open and honest about it. I really don't like the good enough mentality where you're just like, oh, it doesn't really work, but it's fine, it's good enough. I don't ever want to be that. I don't want to have that attitude as far as Bound goes.
Right.
So that's rather important.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to work well together if you can't trust each other.
The other thing I would add to that is knowing who's in charge, because you need to have one person who's the lead, that when it does come down to a coin toss, someone needs to be in charge. It helps me immensely knowing that Matt is the lead on this project. So it means when I write a script, I don't get emotionally attached to things. I just assume he could redline anything at any point. If I really like it, I file it away and it might work later. And that makes writing a lot more comfortable for me. But again, just because he's in charge of it doesn't mean he always gets the last say. We really do have to sell ideas to each other. And especially when something feels like it's not working to one of us. I can't tell you how many times I've pulled the grammar book off the shelf and discovered that I was wrong and he was right. And that is not how you use that word or punctuation. And it's great. And I learn and I grow because I don't go, well, I'm the writer, so you can't correct my spelling or word usage. You have to be open to that criticism, and you have to be aiming for the best and not just good enough. Well, yeah, it might not be technically correct, but everyone uses it that way, so we should put it in. Like, we really do want to have that high bar, and knowing that whatever your goals are, whether you want that high bar or it is a project that you just can be just good enough because you're just kind of messing around or whatever, if that's what it is, as long as everyone's on the same page with it. But that clear communication that you'll still get a little defensive sometimes. That is a human reaction to things. But knowing I can walk in at any point in time, look at something and go, I don't like how that's drawn right there. That is distracting me on the page. Or I don't know what you're going for on this page, but my eye goes there. And sometimes that's what he's going for, and sometimes it's not. And it's the same thing with words. I write something, I think it's great, but if you read it with a different inflection, it could come across wrong or offensive or something. And like, we don't want that. Even if I like how it sounds in my head, if it doesn't sound good in his head, then that means other readers like him will have that experience, and we don't want that. So right. I think, yeah.
I can come to Therese with just about any drawing and say what doesn't work here. Like, if I'm not sure, if I don't feel like, if I feel like something looks weird, or maybe Natalia's shoulders too big on the left there, like I'll ask Therese how she feels about it. Does it look okay? Does it look wrong? Sometimes things just need to look correct. They don't actually have to be correct, especially when in drawing. Like your mind kind of fills some things in, so you don't have to have every single detail on the building, for people to know it's a building. Right. So I can come to her and be like, does this bother you? Does this look okay? There's that trust that I think is really important, because otherwise you're kind of walking on eggshells, or you're just letting someone else decide what the outcome is, which is fine. I mean, if you're just doing a job, then you do the best you can and hope they like it. But with this, I think it's kind of, it's close to our hearts. So I kind of go with my gut with a lot of stuff. And I think sometimes if something doesn't feel right to you, I think, yeah, you kind of have to listen to that. I don't know. That's a very long-winded answer to your question. Yeah, like I think trust is a huge thing when you're starting a project with someone.
So this has been a very a long-term project doing this. How much of this now is, as you're working on it, is you're thinking about wanting to tell your story, and how much of this is that you put into it from the script and the drawing to for a reader, for the sake of a reader, and not for the sake of for you wanting to finish your story?
Yeah, I think some of that stuff we talked about earlier with like the world building. I don't want to make those same mistakes that I've seen over the years of things that I loved that just went in different directions that turned me off. Right. So I think a lot of that stuff, it's kind of like, do we show more of the city, and do we show Natalia in that environment, and do we do a little bit of slower pacing and a little bit of just like atmospheric pages that aren't filled with action or story, or do we drive the story forward, and do we get to the next point of the story? There's I don't know, it's tricky to find a balance. But again, I just kind of go with my gut and what I would want to see happen next, kind of.
Yeah, it's definitely when the script and the drawings come together, I think is when we consider the reader the most. Is this going to flow? Is it going to make sense? Is it going to deliver on the promise? When they picked up that first issue and they started it, are they going to read in issue 6? Is it still going to feel like the same series, or is it going to feel like a different kind of story? So kind of like Matt said, we ended a couple issues on cliffhangers, and that was our rhythm. And that rhythm, can be comfortable because you know what to expect, but also you need to actually finally deliver something too. You can't just keep leaving people on cliffhangers. You have to actually give them some substance.
Yeah,
I think
with
definitely
issue 6, we definitely.
Yeah, issue 6 definitely, like, it doesn't. I don't want to say it ties up loose ends, because that's not what happens. But you finally get some of the things that have been promised, some of the things that you've been shown a little bit of, really start to come round full circle, and you kind of have by the end of the issue, I think you've got a really good foot on what the world can do, what can happen in this world. So, once issue 7 starts, you kind of really know what things are at risk, what things, what Natalia is really up against, what kind of world it is. I think issue 6 definitely ends up kind of finishing the definition of the world she lives in, of, Seth being there, of the other creatures, and a few other things too that you'll see when it's out, because it's still at the printer. But I think that's definitely. Oh, sorry, I just remembered issue 6. I really love it. It really does. It really does cinch up a lot of things that I think, as we're putting it together, we definitely went through too, and we're like, okay, is this? Have we, like, Natalia doesn't refer to Seth by name in the earlier issues. So when the first time she does, we make sure that we know that she, like, how she got that information, because you don't want your reader to be like, wait, she's known his name this whole time. Why has she never used it? Like, you don't want people distracted. And so going through and I went back through all the issues, and I'm like, okay, has she used it? Nope, not at all. We need to make sure when she uses it, that it just fits, and it's not going to hang anyone. No one's going to get distracted by the fact that she's all of a sudden using his name. So when we put the words on the page and stuff, that really is when we start thinking about our reader, and what are they going to experience, and are they going to feel that we've delivered on that promise early on. At least that's when I feel like I think about the reader the most. And that lets us make a better story, because if we write what we like, and if we draw what we like, and if we're putting in the things that we like and from our heart, then we have great material to work with. Because if we like it, someone else will too. If we are focused on the reader for the whole thing, we would end up with something that it wouldn't be able to have the heart that Brown really has at all.
And you wouldn't enjoy it.
Yeah. It would be a calculated mess.
I think that's another bit of advice I would give, is that don't worry too much about other people's opinions, because you can't please everyone. And even the people that might be into Bound at the moment, they might lose interest. They might not like where the story is going, and we can't really do anything to prevent that. It's just the nature of being reading something or being a fan of something, that it's not always going to please everybody, and it's not always going to have that mass appeal. But as long as we feel that it's still going in the right direction, and we still have a passion for it every time we work on it, then it's all good.
Right. Cool. So if people want to check out your work, what's the best place that they can go to?
Probably Patreon. Our website is a good place to start. Hexapus-inc.com. Patreon/Hexapus Inc., all one word, is a good place to start. I do have like public posts on there, so people can see some of. I think they can see all of issue 1 and 2. And GlobalComix, we have bound up for free for the time being.
Okay.
Issues 1 through 5 are all up there on globalcomics.com.
Okay.
And yeah, we've had a lot of a great response on GlobalComix, which is, I think,
I saw that you had some more listed as most popular of 2020 sci-fi.
Yeah, which was a surprise because we really did like zero advertising for it. I didn't really promote it. I just put it on GlobalComix, and yeah, it kind of caught people's attention, and which was
Right.
great. It was definitely unexpected, and it was nice. It was a nice surprise because we put so much of our heart and soul into it, and to see people respond to it was really great.
Yeah, congratulations. I mean, that was something they said most popular 2021 comic for sci-fi comics.
Yeah. It was a really nice surprise, especially at the end of the year, and it was a rough couple of years. So to know that what we were doing is resonating with people, no pun intended.
Like Matt said, we didn't do any promotion for it, so it was really, really reassuring to see the story that we love just take off on its own. It the story was engaging people, because there's a lot, issue 1 has, of course, the most clicks and everything, but a lot of people have gone through everything that's up all through issue 5. And that just feels good, knowing that our story is engaging and people, what we're doing it the way we want to do it is working, and it's working in a way that does let us reach other people, like tell the story that people are going to read it. So it was really exciting last year when we hit #1 for sci-fi, and then we did hit #1 for the year of all of them, especially up against, some of the other comics that are in there too. There's some
there's some big ones.
There's some major publishers with stuff up. So to see us, kind of rise to the top was really, really good feeling.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, you got like Image. You got some Image books there, and you beat out like Image titles.
Yeah, it was like almost like, is this real? Is this like, am I just not reading this right?
Well, the first time Matt told me the number that we had was like, I think it was like in the 50,000s or something. I didn't understand that metric, and I thought that was just the number of times a spontaneous ad popped it up on someone's phone, and didn't realize that was actually people clicking it and going to it. And then I like logged in to do it. I'm like, this is people have read this. And it was really, really crazy and really cool to see it so kind of widely accepted.
You put something out there, and you probably have experienced this as well. Like, you put a lot of work into something and you put it out there, and you hope that people will take notice, but there's no guarantee that.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. And so, and you got there's an interview that's on there too under on GlobalComix that people can check out as well. So so congratulations on winning, on getting that most popular 2021 sci-fi, and looking forward to checking out when issue 7 comes out, and so on and so forth. So you're gonna have to come back on. You two of you are gonna have to come back on and really talk about as your newer issues come out too. So
yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, perfect. So hexapus-inc.com is a good landing page, and as you said, you got a great Patreon. People should definitely be able to check out your Patreon page. Always active, which is always really appreciated. And so thanks a lot for coming back on, and we'll have to touch base again as you've got a few more issues out.
Yeah. Thank you for having us. It's always a good time talking with you.
you said earlier in a previous interview we met with you that you're going to make it a 12-issue run.
Mm-hmm.
And so why make the, hang on, let me, I'm going to timestamp this so that I can edit this part. I stumbled. That way when I talk, I'll seem just straight across. I'm like, wow, he's just so succinct in his questioning.